blood marrow transplantation actually is a procedure, a process to rescue hematopoiesis after chemo and radiation therapy by infusing the autologous hematopoietic stem cell. That's really the definition of this transplant. Source of hematopoietic stem cell which can be used are bone marrow, peripheral blood stem cell, and cord blood, as we had talked about before. Invariably, these cells have been previously collected and cryopreserved either as unprocessed product or following selection procedure, because some of the cases we do select like CD34 cells to do the further processing. And occasionally we do give unfrozen products to these patients, autologous products, just like in gene therapy, we'll take autologous marrow, do the CD34 selection on those, gene modified, that can be given fresh without cryopreservation. Indication for autologous transplantation in pediatrics, which are the large number of cases, like diseases like neuroblastoma, brain tumor, sarcoma, Hodgkin disease, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. These are the common diseases for which in pediatrics for which autologous transplants are done. We also utilize the autologous cells for gene therapy. In adults, the primary indications are for Hodgkin disease, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, multiple myeloma, solid tumor, breast cancer. So these are the major indication. Of course, these are now being extended to other diseases for which we think we can intensify the treatment because we can rescue their marrow by giving hematopoietic stem cell. Autologous transplants are also being used in many autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis, myositis, scleroderma, Crohn's disease. Some of these are investigational protocol, but I just wanted to share with you that these are the areas where the autologous stem cells are being utilized. And then developing mesenchymal cells out of the autologous marrow or progenitor cells from other sources. Even in myocardial injury, you have heard about that, infusing those mesenchymal cells that have been used. And similarly for CNS disease, CNS injuries, that how these cells are being utilized to heal these injured parts which otherwise would be leaving a permanent damage to these patients. Okay? I mentioned to you that autologous transplant activity in US, as you can see, they started somewhere in 1980 and in 1985 it started peaking, and now in mid about 2002 that we were doing about 35,000 autologous transplant, about 13,000 transplants just in USA alone. And this peak was for the breast cancer. As you know, 1 in 9 women will be affected with the breast cancer. So there were a large number of female patients who were undergoing autologous transplantation. Once the study showed that it was not that effective except for very selected group of patients, this indication has been dropped off. And since then, there's another increase happening. It's for multiple myeloma. That's a disease which is being identified, for which autologous transplant are being utilized continually. Whereas there's a steady increase in the allogeneic transplant also, but somewhat limited cases. But unrelated donor transplant is surpassing the matched sibling donor transplantation. So the collection of autologous hematopoietic stem cells, I said it could be bone marrow, peripheral blood, cord blood, and we'll talk about the bone marrow is collected, as you know, under general anesthesia. I'll show you the picture just so that you'll have an idea. But whatever is collected, that must be, as was mentioned earlier, that any of these hematopoietic stem cell products have to have quality assessment as well as the analysis of that cryopreservation. That's a very important part that one has to keep in mind. Quality assessments of cord blood, which was just talked about, is very critical because one of the things is that you do need to have obstetrician working along with you. It's not just collecting some tubes of cord blood. It's very important that appropriate quantity of that cord blood gets collected, not compromising the baby, but after the cord has been tapped. It's very important that people do make an effort to collect as much as possible the cord blood from the placenta. And then the treatment to mobilize the peripheral blood stem cell, that's a very important thing we'll talk about in a moment. that is necessary and for prior to apheresis collection of peripheral blood stem cell. Again, the quality analysis of that becomes equally important. And the second step is conditioning of the patient. Transplantation, like we talked about, allogeneic transfer, is equally important for this case also. And infusion of previously cryopreserved and thawed products, so that's the next step in transplantation. Now, harvesting bone marrow. I just wanted to show you that it doesn't matter whether it's for autologous or for allogeneic procedures. I'm sure most of you have done bone marrow aspiration. Actual procedure of collection is very similar, except for doing, rather than doing one stick, you're maybe doing 100 sticks to collect adequate quantity of marrow. It's collected with some media and anticoagulant, filtered, and then taken for cryopreservation. In this case, I'm also showing the infusion because infusion is given intravenously just like any blood transfusion product. And as I mentioned for cord blood, after baby is delivered and the baby is clamped, the cord is clamped, after that you do the collection, so there should be no adverse effect on the baby. That's a very critical part. But how much time the staff in the delivery room are paying attention to that, how much is being collected, how much effort they are making, that becomes very critical. And for peripheral blood stem cell collection is a little bit more tricky in the sense that does require physician's intervention here because we have to mobilize those stem cells from the bone marrow into the circulation. And we do that with the use of GCSF. The standard dose is 10 microgram per kilogram per day. You give for 4 days initially, and on the 5th day, you start collecting. You're still giving the GCSF, and then you start collecting the peripheral blood stem cell. We also can give the pegylated GCSF, which is given in the dose of 6 to 12 milligram per kilogram as a single dose. And then another thing which has been used is AMT 3100. That is for 200 microgram per kilogram. So that's again, this is an agent which is given in conjunction with GCSF. It is not a cleaning agent. So in cases if you are not able to mobilize the peripheral blood stem cell just by giving GCSF, you can use the second agent because it cleans those cells which otherwise have not been able to come out of the niches of the bone marrow and come into circulation. But the timing of it, when you give the agent and when you start collecting, is a very critical part. It is like within 6 to 12 hours period, the stem cell collection must be initiated in those cases. Vascular access is very critical for any physician who is dealing with collection of these stem cells. Adult, you have very good antecubital veins that you can just put the entry catheter there and may be able to collect the cells in those cases. Central access for small child, we have put as small as 5 kilo kit on a machine to collect the stem cell, but you do need to have deep central venous catheter in those patients to be able to get enough blood out of their body to be going through the machine and to be able to collect the stem cells. And then for somewhere the children who are age 7 or over, you still have to make sure the veins are big enough that there will be appropriate flow of blood from the circulation going into the machine. So if your flow is less than 30 cc a minute, it will not really work. In those cases, you will not be able to collect properly. So in those cases, you may need a central venous catheter for this cases. So what our target dose which we aim to collect is 4 times 10 to the 6 CD34 positive cell for one procedure. If you're planning to do a tendon transplant, you just multiply with 2 or 3 depending on how many procedures you plan to do it. And minimum for any one given procedure we like to do is 2 times 10 to the 6 CD34 per kilogram of the recipient body weight. Okay? Maximum, we kind of go here 8 times 10 to the 6 CD34 positive cells because that becomes our somewhat limitation, how many hours of procedure you can do, how much you can collect. Sometimes we do have to collect for more than 1 day and maybe 2 or 3 days collection depending on what you are attempting to collect because you have limited chance of collecting the cell and then using it for the transplantation. Peripheral blood stem cell, I'm sure you all have seen that machine that was shown it earlier. Can be a very young child, if they have central venous catheter, it's a very comfortable procedure and is tolerated well. And once the product is collected, it's important that it's handled with the utmost care. We do use the biological safety cabinet for processing the cells, whatever may need to be done, whether it's sampling, whether it's processing, it has to be done in biological safety approach. And then depending on if you do need to select the cells, you'll be using one of these machines to select the CD34 positive cell or generating specified cell. So one of these machines could be used for that purpose. After that, it is cryopreserved. It is placed in this specific cassette and then cryopreserved in the control rate freezer. And I'll show you for a moment at what it's all about. So one of the things which I do want to tell people who might be here in charge of the laboratory, that we have to have an oxygen sensor where we are doing this cryopreservation, because liquid nitrogen does absorb, so for safety of the worker, the oxygen sensor is important. So I was talking about the cryopreservation is very specific. It's a control rate freezing. So we drop the temperature of the product 1 degree centigrade per minute. That's what it's supposed to be. But if you notice that there's a dip here. Okay? So when it is going from liquid to solid phase, certainly there's a generation of heat. And that will thaw the product. So if it's thawed and freezing, then it will make crystal, which will kill the cell. So very important that it never thaws the product as you're getting to 4 degrees. You drop the temperature down to minus 40 degrees to compensate for that heat, so that cell never have thawing of the material inside the cell, which is still losing temperature 1 degree centigrade. As you see that this, the upper line is the temperature of the product and lower line is the temperature of the cabinet in which it's being frozen. So it's very critical that we compensate for that. And sometimes you can do the dump freeze. That's not something which we have established that yes, you can do that, but it's very inexpensive. That rather than doing control rate freezing, you can take it, put it in minus 20, initially in the minus 4 degrees, then minus 20 after overnight, and then you can put it in liquid nitrogen in the vapor phase. It also drops the temperature very similar and have pretty good viability, but to maintain and document the standard, which is very critical part in processing, that nowadays it is required by the standard that we must do the control rate freezing. And then the product is kept in frozen conditions here in these containers, and which can be kept in for indefinite time frame. I have used 19-year-old product. That was my probably oldest product I have used, but if you know that the viability of those cells, if it's maintained appropriately, will be very good. So transplantation condition regimen, again myeloablative regimen, which we talked about in the previous talk. It is really that if you want to go to the stem cell destruction level, that you want to eliminate those stem cells, so you will be doing myeloablative conditioning. But reduced intensity conditioning regimen is very well accepted for many solid tumors. And again, there are various agents. It is still myeloablative. It's reduced intensity to minimize the toxicity related to the conditioning regimen. That's the reason it's a reduced intensity. And you'll find that some of the elderly folks may not be able to tolerate the myeloablative regimen, and the only way actually this was developed to offer the transplantation to some of those patients who could not tolerate the myeloablative regimen. And then in these cases, it's not very, so there's less toxicity in this particular area. And in some situation, we only do immunosuppressive and transient myelosuppression, which is like in gene therapy, or if we are trying to do cell therapy for some of the tumor like brain tumor, if you want to give the specified cytotoxic T cell, in those cases you may have to have immunosuppression and lymphodepletion before you can allow these new cells to really grow in those cases. So it's very critical. You have to see what condition it is, and then you select the condition regimen accordingly. And then with definitely in non-myeloablative, there's minimal cytopenia and very little toxicity, so it's tolerated very well. Once we have patient whose product has been cryopreserved and we conditioned it, the patient for transplantation, the product is brought to the patient's bedside. That's how most of our patients can be receiving that as bedside. We bring it in frozen state in liquid nitrogen, and you have the water bath here where the product is thawed and can be infused into the patient, and is given intravenously. The survival, so I just thought I'll show you some of the results of these patients who otherwise have lethal diseases, like let's say autologous transplant for neuroblastoma. Stage 4 neuroblastoma have awful outcome if they have relapsed and did not recover from the initial treatment. These patients do very poorly. However, with the transplantation, event-free survival at 5 years is 50% in those cases. Where you see this 93%, 95%, day 100, and 89% at 1 year. Yes, these are bad disease, some of those will relapse, but in this post-transplantation, they have 50% event overall survival and event-free survival of 42%. But these patients otherwise would be less than 10% event-free survival if they just received chemotherapy. These are great stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma. Brain tumor, very similarly, that these patients have 60% overall survival at 5 years. That's another brain tumor. Most of these are high-risk brain tumor, whether you are talking about medulloblastoma or multiform, multiforme. So in those cases also, these are bad actors. That yes, some of these are recipient of tandem transplant, some are the recipient of single transplant, depending on their condition eventually. And their overall survival was, event-free survival in these cases at 5 years is 47%, which is very encouraging. I'm not saying that we have reached the ultimate where we should be, but these are very encouraging results. So I've taken some of the data from, just to give you an idea from bigger patient population, that in Hodgkin disease, autologous transplant is being utilized extensively. This is the data on 3,199 patients. Patients who were transplanted in CR, good clinical response rate, which we are talking about. We have 78% event-free survival in those cases. Patients who are not in complete remission, but do have chemosensitive disease, you still have about 60% event-free survival in those cases. But the patients who are not CR and do not have chemosensitive disease, those patients otherwise would be not doing very well and the progressive disease in short period of time will die of their disease. But in this situation, 50% of patients are alive 5 years post-transplantation. This is a large cell lymphoma, again sensitive disease and resistant disease. That's in the disease status we talked about earlier also in our allogeneic transplant. It's very important to recognize if you have very resistant disease, you're not going to be able to do very well even in this setting. But in the sensitive disease, you're talking about close to 50% event-free survival, and in the resistant disease documented with the regular chemotherapy, that there is 60% chances they will relapse of the disease and will not survive. Okay? Multiple myeloma, which is becoming a more common disease for which the autologous transplants are being performed, you will find that 60% of the patients who are receiving the autologous transplant are alive 5 years post-transplant. Whereas the patients who are receiving sibling donor transplant, their survival is about 45%, and for unrelated donor transplant, the survival is only about 25%. The question is, in this case, it's a little bit misleading data. The patient who had a good disease, whose marrow was responding to the chemotherapy, yes, we were able to collect the stem cells of their own and were able to proceed with autologous transplant. Patients who never cleared their marrow of the disease and have a lot of disease, that's where you are going with the, with the allogeneic transplantation. So that may be just the patient's disease and selection of patient, why there's a difference in this outcome. So what happens in the patient who do not do well? Majority of the patients have relapse of the disease. We recognize it that 69% of the patients who die because they have a relapse of the disease. And then infection, organ failure are the other causes in these patients that can lead to death in these patients. In summary, the autologous transplant allows more intensive treatment for the diseases which fail otherwise with the standard chemotherapy. Collection and processing of HC, the hematopoietic stem cell, is critical and must meet all the required standards. We were told earlier, that how to be, for anyone else to be practicing this particular part of the treatment, that we have to meet certain standards. We have to make sure the collection is done appropriately, the processing is there, we are meeting all those standards. That's a very critical part, of the we shut down from really practicing that part of medicine. Disease in response, in remission and with a good response, and transplant drug in the early course of the disease has a better outcome. That's very obvious. Tendon transplant with the multiple cycles of intensive treatment has better potential for achieving the cure, because we saw that most of the fatality was because of relapse of disease, so we have to undertake that process with a high-risk malignant disease. And then better conditioning and transplant treatment is needed for us to improve the results of autologous transplant. And autologous transplant now is being explored to apply into other diseases, especially like autoimmune diseases. And this is a greeting from Los Angeles, and it's a good place to work because we work with very dedicated, hardworking people. So thank you very much.